All right, draft just a little over 2 weeks away. We're going to play a little path to the prospect today. Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you. It is SNL. Subscribe, like, right along. All podcast platforms. Texans, I got to say, Stoots, it's kind of weird because there's all this chatter about what can happen early in the draft and all that. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really impact Texans. Like the overall impact of like when stuff really impact, like, because wherever Travis Hunter goes, we don't expect that to impact the Texans. We didn't expect him to be there in the first place. Like Shedeur Sanders, is he going to go before? Like it just feels like it's kind of like the chatter is interesting, but it's not necessarily localized and impactful when it comes to the Texans.
Yeah, I mean, Travis Hunter, the only thing I really cared about with him was he going to end up going to the Tennessee Titans? And he's not. They're going to draft a quarterback. They're going to draft Cam Ward. And we'll see what the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Colts do. But the amount of impact that happens at the top of the draft, it doesn't matter as much. It's kind of when you get to that 11th, 12, 13 kind of range where it kind of does get interesting, because I'm reading today, like, I didn't know there were this many first-round pass rushers, but you got a couple of draft picks saying, hey, first-round pass rushers could fly off the board, and they could be 6, 7 different guys going in the first round that are pass rushers. And I'm like, well, that pushes some players down to the Texans big time. Big time.
Yeah, very, very, very much big time. I'm going to let you hold this down. I'm going to check some technical stuff real quick. Hold on just a second.
All right, so Landry's going to work on the technical stuff. But so, again, as you think about how does a player get to 25, we'll talk about this with path to the prospect here in just a second. We're going to focus some on Matthew Golden today as well. But as you think about exactly how a player ends up at 25, well, you've got to have players unexpectedly go ahead of where the Texans select. So when you look at the first round order, and I'm going to pull up just the first round here. When you look at the first round order and you start to think about, okay, like you kind of have a good idea of the type of player that's going 1 through 3. You know, it's going to be Cam Ward. It's going to be Travis Hunter. It's going to be Abdul Carter. But when you get to like 11 through 20, that's where players that the Texans might be interested in. Like if they start to slip because teams draft defensive ends, somebody sneaks up and grabs a running back that wasn't expected to go there. Teams continue to throw it at wide receivers. That pushes offensive linemen down. Teams throw it at offensive linemen. That pushes wide receivers down. So while the top of the draft is intriguing and it is important, the effect for the Texans really starts to kind of pay attention 11, 12. Certainly 13 kind of becomes a point where if you like some of the same things that the Indianapolis Colts like, you'd have to get up to 13. Miami, you know, maybe they want to stick and pick there. But then 15 and 16, I was reading about the Cardinals. They like to have big draft classes, so they like to move back. The Falcons don't have as much draft capital, so they might be a team that you can move back. And as players start to come off the board early on, and I'm reading about these pass rushers, and it wasn't like some just like wild guess. It was like, hey, I've talked to NFL teams. They feel like, 6, 7, 8 pass rushers could come off the board. And I'm just like, I'm trying to find 6, 7, 8 pass rushers to come off the board here in the first round and try to figure out exactly where those pass rushers would go if they are going. Because like I understand certainly Abdul Carter from Penn State, Jalen Walker from Georgia. And then I strongly believe Mykel Williams from Georgia is also going to be a first rounder. Like, so now we're going to find 3 more. So that's Shamar Stewart from Texas A&M. It's Mike Green from Marshall. It's Donovan Ezeraku from Boston College. James Pierce Jr. from Tennessee. It's like, okay, trying to get to 25. Let's call it 2 quarterbacks. Well, there's 2. Let's call it a running back. There's 3. Now let's call it 2 wide receivers. Let's count Travis Hunter and let's say Tetairoa McMillan. Okay, so with 2 quarterbacks, a running back, 2 wide receivers, there's 5. Let's call it 2 tight ends. There's 7. So now let's throw 6 pass rushers in there. So you throw 6 pass rushers in there. Now that's 13 players that are off the board for the Texans pick at 25. And you're starting to say to yourself, okay, like now a really good player is getting pushed down. Let's call it the 2 top tackles the Texans aren't going to get a shot at. Now there's 15 players off the board. And so you start to see how a really good player ends up in the Texans' lap because there's a intense focus that people didn't believe was going to happen on defensive ends. And then that's just defensive ends. We didn't even talk about the fact that there could be another 2, 3 defensive tackles come off the board. So now you're really starting to see how a good player gets pushed down. Certainly a wide receiver like a Golden, an Egbuka, maybe a tight end like Loveland, and then the offensive lineman, which we've all talked about a ton here on the channel as well. HDAV Traveler with the super chat. Appreciate you for jumping in. Let's get this party started. We'll get it even more started when the technical issues wrap up and Landry Locker re-enjoins us, but appreciate you for the super chat, HDAV Traveler. Remember, want you guys to put it in your calendars. Live streams on the SNL channel for night 1 and night 2 of the NFL draft. That is the 24th and the 25th of this month. So 24th, 25th, we'll hang out with you throughout the entire first round. We'll hang out with you through the entire second and third round as well. On the 26th, that Saturday, on the 26th, we'll have a location. We'll get everybody together. We'll all hang out. We'll watch some football. We'll watch the draft, and we'll have some beverages. Got a couple of places up in the air trying to figure it out, trying to get it as centrally located as we can for you. But on the 26th, that's Saturday, day 3 of the NFL draft, be ready to join us for the SNL draft party. So we'll be hanging out with you talking football, talking about day 1, talking about day 2, and seeing what day 3 offers us. I got a hunch. Okay, Texans currently not slated to pick in the 4th round. I got a hunch if Nick Caserio does some moving around, they will indeed be there to pick in the 4th round. So day 3 could get a little interesting early if the Texans do some moving around on the first 2 days. We'll get Landry Locker here in just a moment. Take some of your comments, your questions, your joys, and your concerns. Brandon says, Travis Hunter would be perfect for the Browns. One of the few things keep their fans interested in their sad team. Yeah, Hunter, number 2 to the Browns, has kind of been the heavy emphasis here in the past few days. And I don't know exactly where they're going to play him. If they do get him, I don't know exactly what's going to happen there. With Hunter, is he going to be primarily a wide receiver? Is he going to be primarily a cornerback for them? Is he going to play a little bit of both? I know he's been saying, hey, I could play a full load at both. You just got to give me the opportunity. Some teams have said they don't want to give me that opportunity, so I certainly understand that aspect of it from a team making that investment. Hey, we're not going to play you, 100+ snaps over the course of this game. That makes me think that maybe they're thinking quarterback with that second selection. And again, when you look at the first round, and you look at where the Texans are at 25, and the Browns are sitting there at the top part of the second round with the 33rd overall pick, that's a trade partner for you. Now, maybe they would say, hey, we don't really want to deal with the Texans again. But if there's multiple teams interested, like, say, Cleveland at 33 or the Giants at 34 or Las Vegas at 37, if they want to come up and get their quarterback of the future, New Orleans at 40, all of a sudden 25 becomes pretty intriguing, and especially intriguing when Cleveland is involved if they indeed take Travis Hunter at that second overall spot. They become a potential QB team if Shedeur Sanders, Jackson Dart are sitting there at 25. So that could be an intriguing trade back option for the Texans should the Browns indeed take Travis Hunter as the number 2 overall pick. Let's see what Landry Locker's got for us.
Yeah, the Travis Hunter thing I think is interesting because I think it would actually be a smart move for the Browns. I think he's the best wide receiver. If you take the best wide receiver in the draft at number 2, you also take a reserve corner. I think there's value there. I also do think another dark horse, and Schefter brought this up today on ESPN, another dark horse would be if the Browns were to do that and then try to trade up and get Shedeur Sanders and Travis Hunter, kind of create some buzz, some good feel among their fan base. Now, I don't know if they're trying to balance the circus of Deshaun Watson and then kind of take on the entire, like all the Colorado movement or what. But I do think that would be interesting. And I think that would be something to keep an eye on if they pass on a quarterback. I also think if we want to localize it, if the Giants decide they don't want Shedeur Sanders, maybe they tried to trade back into the back end of the first round and get maybe a Jackson Dart, maybe not even necessarily a Shedeur Sanders. So I think it's interesting. And as far as actually impacting the Texans, I think the teams that perhaps need a quarterback that don't like Sanders or Dart up there, they could be potential trade partners later in the first.
Well, and if you're the Browns and you end up with Travis Hunter and you end up with Shedeur Sanders, then, I mean, you're a landing spot potentially for Dion when you move on from Kevin Stefanski, if you've got both of them.
Yeah, and I do think Hunter, just as a wide receiver, I think he's better than any of the other guys. I don't think that's too far-fetched, too crazy. I don't think he's the best DB, but I do think he's the best receiver. And if you factor in, I do wonder, like, how much do you think a good number 3 corner typically costs? Like a good one, 8 to 10.
Number 3,
yeah, a good number 3 corner. What is that, like 8 to 10?
Well, the Jacksonville kind of blew the market up with the guy that they paid. They paid him like $10 million. I would tell you somewhere between 6 to 10.
Yeah, 6 to 10, and then a really good wide receiver 20. So I mean, as far as like roster flexibility, I don't know how much that comes into play. I don't know how they're going to use him. Some might want to use him as a corner a little bit more than a receiver. I think he's a better NFL receiver than he is corner.
He'd be, if we just added him into last year's class.
Oh, last year's class, he's going. I mean, if we're just talking wide receiver, he's going late first.
Yeah, I would say for me, he would have been 6th because I would have liked Harrison, Neighbors, Adunze, Brian Thomas Jr., and Ladd McConkey more than him.
Yeah, and I don't know. I wonder if teams would have liked McConkey more. The McConkey thing, like in a redraft, I mean, it's almost crazy to think about when he would go in a redraft, which is the beauty of this wide receiver class is we're talking about the wide receivers and, you know, is this guy going to be that? A year into it, a lot can change. Matthew Golden, I saw he got invited to the draft. I think it's evident that he's really the only wide receiver where it seems like his stock has done nothing but soar since the season concluded. Like there have been questions about McMillan. There have been questions about Egbuka, but Golden's like consistently gone up ever since the season ended, which is pretty rare overall. And it's really rare with his peers, the other wide receivers in this class.
The draft process has been great for Golden. You go out there, the combine, you run fast, you run faster than, just about everybody else in the entire draft process. Like that obviously creates some buzz for you, but his sort of prisoner of the moment buzz started on December 7th when he had 162 yards and 8 catches against Georgia. And then a few weeks later against Arizona State, he had 149 yards on 7 catches and a touchdown. And so he has 2 huge games there on the back end of the season. The draft process has been kind with him from a workout standpoint, and the position scarcity has helped him become sort of a rising name and a rising prospect throughout the course of the draft conversation. And so he's had a really good past 5 months, basically, as a football player, even though you shouldn't judge a draft prospect. You shouldn't draft any draft prospect over just 5 months. It should be the totality of the body of work. But his past 5 months have been great for him.
Yeah, it's been incredible. I mean, it's almost like an unquestioned first round thing. It went from, could he be a first round guy to unquestioned first round guy and perhaps the first wide receiver taken, which take with a grain of salt because draft dialogue, obviously it's not the end all be all, but it does appear like just based on all we have to judge it off of, it does appear to be the case when it comes to that, like to the point where I don't even know, we might get into it here, but the path of the Texans getting him, like it was early on, it was a discussion about would you like to have him there? Now it's, well, I don't know that he's going to be there. So
I have
changed.
I have such a hard time figuring out what to make of Golden because there's just not a lot of guys that have been as lightly productive as him and turned out to be really, really good football players. Like I understand what he did those final 4 games and how important he was to Texas in that conference championship game and certainly the playoff run. I understand that. But like he was like I watched a ton of Texas this year. You watch every game. It's not like Matthew Golden's like jumping off the page when you go and watch him throughout the course of the year. Like he had a nice play, a nice moment here and there. Like a lot of Golden's, like a lot of his, a lot of the positive about him as a draft prospect is sort of projecting and building on the light amount of production that you saw there on the back end.
Yeah, and it's also a result of the weak surroundings around him too, and that's where I kind of just wonder, like at this point with the Texans in round 1, are you drafting a wide receiver just out of need, which I would say is their biggest need, or do you really think that Matthew Golden and Egbuka are quality players that you take at that position, especially given some of the other opportunity that you may or may not have? So that's something to really keep an eye on. The other thing that is really starting to get interesting, and it's a result of something that you said and some other stuff that we've seen, is the wild card, which doesn't like directly affect the Texans, but I do wonder, when does Tyler Warren go in this draft? And you threw out the New England possibility, and I started kind of thinking, okay, could that actually happen? And then Jacksonville and all these other possibilities, because Indianapolis has their heart set on Tyler Warren. And I just wonder, could that be kind of the surprise? And with all this discussion that we're having about the wide receiver class and how the wide receiver class isn't as good, and maybe the offensive line, the tackle class isn't as good, and we're coming off of what Brock Bowers did last year in a league where teams often try to duplicate whatever success there is. Like, could there be a situation where a team like New England that needs offensive line and they need wide receiver, they get something that can kind of help both of those things in a perfect world, like a Tyler Warren? And that kind of seems like one of the dark horses for me. Like if I'm wagering and I'm looking for like a long shot, like a 10-1, 15-1 or something, I think the Tyler Warren thing will be interesting. And how does it impact the Texans? Because the Indianapolis Colts, their fan base, they seem to have their mind made up that Tyler Warren's going to be there when they pick, or he's going to be close enough to where they can go up and get him. I just don't think that's happening with the Colts. I think they're going to have to go up to get him if they decide that they want him.
The Colts, to me, are going to take a tackle at 14 because the tight ends are going to be gone. I believe Warren's going to go. I believe he's going to go earlier than people expected. And I feel like that's going to lead to an increase in where Loveland goes. And then that's going to push down some other players like the tackles. And I think the Colts are going to take a tackle at 14. And they're not going to get their tight end. So, tough, Indy. You got to deal with that. But, I mean, like, I can't figure out why New England wouldn't just take Tyler Warren at 4. Unless they love one of these offensive linemen.
Yeah, I'm with you. I think he might go a little bit early. I did see some, and Joel Klatt. I mean, he's a college football guy, but he'll rank prospects. He had Loveland ahead of Warren, for what that's worth. I don't know how much stock you would want to put in that, but he actually has Loveland ahead of Warren as far as his tight ends. Do with that what you will.
The Yahoo Sports guy he didn't quite go that far, but he certainly made the case that Loveland was a lot closer to Warren than people believed. And it's worth noting Daniel Jeremiah in his top 50, which is essentially works as his big board. He has Tyler Warren 6, he has Colston Loveland 7. So
and I do think there might be a little bit of like a Travis Hunter factor to Tyler Warren in that I think some of the like phenomenal stuff and like the legend of the player is such because of what they did in college. And I don't necessarily think they're going to be able to do that in the pros. Like, I don't think you're running Wildcat with Tyler Warren against NFL defenses. I don't think that's going to be as effective. I don't think you're doing as much of the stuff as Penn State did with their limited offense, with the James Franklin limited offense, as you did with Tyler Warren. Just like I don't think Travis Hunter's playing high-end corner and receiver in the NFL. I don't think that's happening, and I don't think that as a result, I don't think that Travis Hunter as just one position or the other is outside of it not being a very good wide receiver group. I think kind of the legend is kind of grown with those guys, but I still think Travis Hunter's a top 5 pick.
The biggest thing is like teams are going to have to separate the legend from the player and really kind of dig in. And I have seen it's that time of the draft process where we're less than 3 weeks away. I have started to see people take moments of Tyler Warren's game and say, well, he really didn't, it wasn't just him blocking this defensive end. And it's like, well, he was one-on-one with this defensive end. It didn't go so well. And it's like, all right, so we're finding the hair that's out of place on the pretty girl now. That's what we're doing, huh? Okay.
Yeah, that's what's going. And they're both gonna go quick. I don't think that Tyler Warren is. I don't think you're gonna do as much. I think it's just gonna be more receiver, which I think he might be capable of doing.
It would be nice to see him go sooner rather than later, because if the Texans feel like they would benefit from chaos throughout the first round of the draft. It feels like if players who, they went earlier than most teams expected, it pushed other players down. Like, it feels like the Texans could benefit them a lot from the chaos if a guy like Warren goes early and then someone who was dead set on a tight end also picks Loveland early. And so you start to create a little chaos throughout the first round. And the Texans feel like the type of team that could benefit from that.
And I think Loveland probably falls. I mean, I don't think Loveland falls to the Texans either. Like, I think a result of how we're talking about the wide receivers as well. Jim Harbaugh being there, I don't know that we see Loveland fall to 25 either. I don't know that. I mean, that would be cool, and I think it would be something you would have to think about, even if any of the receivers were available. I think you would have to at least think about Loveland, but I wouldn't hold my breath and I wouldn't bet on it.
I do wonder what Loveland's ceiling is. Like, how high could he go? I would tell you
Indianapolis says, okay, we'll take him instead, because the tight end production has been a massive problem. And that's a real bad combination to have, by the way, when you have the crappy quarterback situation they have and you have like incompetent tight end play, because that can kind of be the quarterback's best friend. So maybe the fact that they seem to have the starting quarterback that they believe in, which is kind of funny with Daniel Jones. That's not a quarterback competition. It's Daniel Jones's job. Maybe they think that that adding a tight end is important enough to where if it's not Warren, they'll go Loveland.
If Warren went like 4 to New England, Loveland's ceiling gets higher. Like, his ceiling is like, 7 to the Jets. You could put him at 7 to the Jets. You could put him at 9 to New Orleans. And then certainly 14 to Indianapolis.
Let's get into some of the paths, and let's get into. Let's start with a guy that we've talked about with Matthew Golden. What is the path to Matthew Golden for the Texans? Because I think I don't think you're sitting at 25 and getting Matthew Golden. I think there's a 0% chance that happens. The Texans have visited with him. They probably like what they see, but the path to Matthew Golden, for me personally, I think it starts with him getting past Dallas at 12. I could easily see Dallas taking him at 12. But I think getting past Dallas at 12 and then maybe falling to Atlanta and making a trade with a team that doesn't have a ton of draft picks would be the dream scenario. But the answer is I don't. It's kind of a long shot, but I think it starts with him going past Dallas at 12 because I don't think you're trading up that much to get Matthew Golden.
I would not trade up for Golden, but to your point, the Texans probably have to trade up to get Matthew Golden. I wrote down what I did here was for some of these prospects, if you're wanting to stick and pick at 25, you need a tremendous amount of help. 12 to Dallas, 13 to Miami if they trade Tyreek Hill, which who knows what Tyreek Hill's tweeting about. Maybe he's getting traded, maybe he's not. Seattle at 18 could use Matthew Golden. They traded DK Metcalf, got rid of Tyler Lockett. Golden and Jackson.
They got Cup and JSN though.
Yeah, but both those guys have been inside guys. They need an outside guy. Denver at 20, the Chargers at 22, the Packers at 23, and then we've talked a lot about Minnesota at 24 being that trade team. So some team behind you likes Golden. You're thinking you're going to stick and pick at 25. You got to jump up there ahead of Minnesota to do it, or you got to move with Minnesota to do it. So I just don't see how he gets all the way to the Texans in a 25th overall scenario. So then I guess you've got to move up to say, 18, 19 and get ahead of Denver, the Chargers, and the Packers, who could all use an outside wide receiver.
Yeah, because the problem that you have in the 20s is you have teams that need wide receivers, and then you have Minnesota, and Minnesota has like 4 draft picks. I think they have less than a handful of draft picks. Atlanta has no draft picks. So if you're trying to trade, I think Atlanta's the go-to. It's just a real long shot based on what it is. But if they do love him and he falls past the Cowboys at 12, then I think you at least start thinking that maybe they start crossing their fingers that he falls to 15. But it's, as you said, it's a real long shot.
Yeah.
Playing path to the prospect here on SNL, Landry Locker, Cody Stoots with you. Kelvin Banks Jr., the tackle out of Texas. Some teams feel that he could be a guard. This one seems, I don't want to say real likely, but it's a lot more possible than what's going on with Golden.
I tried to find the top end for him. Just like, would one of these teams go ahead and make the selection? And the highest I could think about him going was 9 to New Orleans. They've just had some really bad luck with their offensive line. He could play a couple of different spots. And he's a lot more of a proven commodity than that silly ass lineman they drafted a few years ago. Penning,
Trevor Penning.
Yeah. So he's a much more proven commodity. Chicago, probably not. They've overhauled their offensive line, but I at least thought about it because of the versatility. San Fran was the one that really kind of piqued my interest with him because Trent Williams is not playing forever. They need a guard. They can play Banks at guard until Williams leaves. Miami just finally got the confirmation that they probably already knew that their tackle was retiring. So Miami, Indy at 14, and then Cincy at 17. But once he gets past Cincy at 17, it's kind of your guy to miss. I couldn't find a reason why. Certainly not Tampa. Denver's got 2 tackles already. Pittsburgh needs so many other things. They also drafted a tackle in the first round last year, guard/tackle. Chargers are good at tackle. Packers are fine. And then Minnesota's fine at tackle. So if he gets past Cincinnati at 17, you might have your best shot at Banks.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing about Banks is unlike Golden, like he's not the unquestioned top guy at his position. So you can kind of see a little bit more of a path. There's also started to become like some sort of questions about can he be a tackle? Can he be a guard? Like, so you have those questions. And then the other one is it just seems like teams have consistently tried to invest in tackles whenever they have the opportunity. So a lot of these teams, like as you said, they're just kind of tied down when it comes to the young tackles. So that's kind of That's kind of the unique situation with Banks to where it could create some sort of opportunity. But I'm with you. I don't know that you necessarily have to trade up with him. Like, for me, if you're trying to get Banks and you're versus trying to get Golden, you have to avoid him falling to 20. Like, you have to avoid him falling to 20. So you might even have to avoid him falling to like 16, 17. But with Banks, you just mentioned it. Like, as soon as he passes Cincinnati, maybe it's trade territory for other teams, but it's hard to make sense of him ending up on any of these teams like as they currently sit.
Yes, I mean, I guess there's an outside chance at Seattle, but even then, you get past Seattle, boom. I mean, you're in a space where he should be sitting there pretty for you at 25 if you want to make that selection.
Cougar on the soup.
You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
How you guys doing today? Can we talk about how undervalued Judkins is right now? I like him more than Henderson and would trade up for him day 2. I do not like him more than Henderson. I think there's a chance you might have to trade up for him on day 2, though. I could see Chip Kelly liking him. I could see a lot of teams. Dallas seems like they might be a decent fit. Running back was a problem last year. They just lost their guy. They're adding bodies, but they haven't added like a massive back like that and a young guy. So I like Judkins. I don't know. The problem I have right now, and I think this is a problem that everyone has, is at least around here, we don't know what the system is. Like, is it a zone running scheme? Is he a zone running back? If he didn't do it in college, is he capable of doing it at the next level? That's really the question. I will say I think he is one of the guys who benefited the most from the 40 time among those other backs. So I'm with you. Maybe he gets to you in the second round. I could see a scenario where it does happen. But I also don't know how he fits and how much they like him. They are visiting with him though, or they have. So,
boy, it'd be nice if Amarion Hampton wasn't a first rounder, because if he ends up in the second round, it helps push a guy like Judkins and even Henderson to an extent down a little bit. But I just have a hard time seeing how Hampton doesn't end up in the first round, the North Carolina running back. So then it's, okay, pick your poison there to start day 2.
Well, the other thing about Judkins that I think is interesting is, he shared the backfield with Henderson. And sometimes when guys do that, you kind of have like the question, okay, well, can he do it we've seen him be the main guy. So he's capable of it. It was just an embarrassment of riches at Ohio State. So that's the other thing. Like, if a lot of times when you're judging guys, like, you're judging them just based on their most recent year, and you don't necessarily look at the body of work. So if you're just factoring in Ohio State, it's like, well, he shared the backfield with Henderson. Well, not before that he didn't at Ole Miss. Like, he's ran for damn near, I think, 4K the last 3 years. So I think a lot of teams, I don't think it's going to take much for one team to get excited about what he can do and what he could potentially provide, especially when you factor in how he measured. So you like him. I'm sure a lot of teams like him. I don't like him as much as he does, where he says he's better than Henderson, but he's an intriguing back. I would watch the Raiders for that in the second round. I would keep a close eye on that.
I agree.
Because they also seem to trust him a lot more in the big games too. Like and maybe that's just because he's more the power back, but did seem like Chip Kelly trusted him a lot. Who's now the Raiders OC. Path to the prospect, Alabama offensive guard Tyler Booker. Now, are we just picking in the first round? Could we possibly see him fall to the second round? That's another question.
That's my thing is, if you want him in the first round, the only team you got to worry about is the Chargers. And then he's there. And I would say the exact same thing for Donovan Jackson from Ohio State, the guard/tackle from Ohio State. All you got to do is worry about the Chargers. If he gets past the Chargers, you can pick him at 25. I don't know that many teams would pick Booker in the first round, just because there are some athleticism concerns. But obviously what he did at Alabama and how successful he was at how they operated, it speaks for itself. They basically stuck him out there as soon as he got on campus, and he took care of his business for 3 straight years, and now he's head of the league. So he's a, this is scary when you start talking about offensive linemen, high floor, low ceiling type of guy. That was the billing for Kenyon Green.
Yep.
I get a lot of Kenyon Green flags about Booker. The results on the field were better because he played primarily one position and was good at it. But the athleticism, the way you talk about him, like, high floor, maybe the ceiling's not as high as other players, like that feels kind of Kenyon Greeny. For
me, the path to Booker is, I think it's a couple things, and it's not like the other guys where you're laying out like what other teams are going to do. I think there's a couple of things that could lead the Texans to taking Tyler Booker, number 25 overall. If he goes before, whatever. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think you're going to have the opportunity. Number one will be, like, do they fall in love with his personality? Because that seems to be something that's very possible. If you hear Tyler Booker talk, like, it does feel like D'Amico Ryans, Nick Caserio would fall in love with his personality. Like, he is that kind of guy. He comes from the program that they all talk about. D'Amico loves Alabama guys. So that's number one.
When they talk to Will Anderson about him, Will Anderson's going to say he's the best thing since sliced bread.
Yeah, they love each other. And then number two will be, like, what does the combination of Caley and Popovich think of him? They're going to have to fall in love with them because the offensive line is such a big need. So I think a combination of those two things would lead you to Tyler Booker. I think number one is like a given, like they're going to like his personality and everything that he sounds like. It's just, I don't know if Cole Popovich and Nick Caley turn on the tape and they just say, okay, this is one of the foundation pieces of our offensive line, and this is it. But I think those are the two ways. I don't have like a draft day path for it. I think those are the two things to not necessarily keep an eye on. That's kind of behind the scenes stuff that we'll never know.
Well, if they draft Tyler Booker, it gives us a pretty good indication of the style of offense they're going to run, because he can't run that zone thing where you got to have the guard going out there and be athletic and peeling off and leading the charge. They're going to be more of a power team if they're drafting a guy like Booker.
David White says hello to the best Texans coverage honkies. Okay.
Race car!
Hello to you, mi amigo. So that's Tyler Booker. You mentioned Donovan Jackson, same thing.
Same thing. Pretty much the same thing you just said too works for him as well.
Emeka Egbuka. This has been one of the more popular, frequent names. Teammate of CJ Stroud. Will he be there or not? This one I think is interesting because I think this is the most potential heartbreak for Texans fans, because from 20 up, it just seems like there's a lot of possibilities. Now, I know some people will say, well, Green Bay doesn't take wide receivers, so you don't have to worry about the Green Bay Packers. Okay, eventually they got to, right? Then you have the teams that we keep mentioning, the Chargers. Now, the Chargers might look at him as too much of a slot guy, but I would keep an eye on that. But I think once he gets to 20, I wouldn't give my hopes up, because there's just so many other things, so many other possibilities when it comes to him. But I would be shocked if he goes in the top 15. I would be pretty surprised.
I feel like the top end of his range, whoa, would be 17 to Cincinnati. They get their slot guy.
God,
the T. Higgins deal is not a real deal. Like they paid T. Higgins a bunch of money. Like they can move on from T. Higgins after 1 or 2 years pretty easy. But 17 to Cincinnati is kind of like everyone's like, what are the Bengals doing? And then it depends on how the teams view him. Do they view him as an outside guy, or is he more of an inside guy? Because if he's an inside guy, then Seattle's not interested. But if they think he can play outside, then they'd be a team. Denver, not so much. Denver feels like they're looking for more top-end talent, like somebody with a higher ceiling. But then the Chargers and Green Bay at 22 and 23. And then once, if the Texans don't pick him at 25, they go somewhere else, he's on the board. He's not hanging out all the way to the next time the Texans are on the board. And he's also, to me, not the type of player that you'd go from 58 to try to go and get.
Yeah, the Vikings are the team that I just keep keeping an eye on, because I think everybody is going to be foaming at the mouth every time that they're on the clock, because they need more picks, man. Like they're one of those teams that just needs more picks, and they're going to be starving. So anytime you're around the Vikings, specifically if you're drafting after the Vikings or whatever, you're in a danger zone. Like it's a very serious danger zone, because these teams know what other teams need. And if the Texans do like Egbuka and everybody knows that they need a wide receiver, then it's a danger zone. So I've seen teams trade up one spot to avoid that. Like we've seen teams just trade up one spot to avoid getting traded over. So that's something to really, really keep a close eye on too. Whenever you're drafting behind the Minnesota Vikings, is you're basically, people are hunting for that spot.
Oh yeah, 24. I have no belief that 24 will be a selection made by the Minnesota Vikings.
I know, and that's the problem too when you look at this. And this is we're all preparing for the draft together here on SNL. Shout out to everyone in the chat. Is when you first look at it, you say, well, there's no way Minnesota's taking a receiver. Are you kidding me? They got the best receiving duo in the league, arguably one of them with Jefferson and Addison. Like that, hell no, they're not doing it. But then it's like, oh, they only have 4 draft picks.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, they also don't have like the best salary situation, so they probably want some young guys. So that's where you keep an eye. I actually wouldn't be surprised if Jackson Dart's not gone at 24, if someone doesn't, I know we're talking about the Texans, but if someone doesn't call Minnesota and say, hey, would y'all like some more picks? And they said yes. And then that was kind of the hot spot. Like that's probably Dart territory, assuming that Pittsburgh doesn't make that decision or something else crazy doesnto happen.
Yeah, the teams with the most extra draft capital, if you're trying to go up to 24 to get something, say to get in front of the Texans, the Browns have a lot of extra picks. The Jags have a lot of extra picks. And then the 49ers have a lot of extra picks too. So if you're thinking about those teams like jumping up from second round up in front of them, and then, I mean, if it's not the craziest thing in the world that Andy Reid or Howie Roseman, sitting down there 31 and 32 would jump up to 24 to get somebody they really like.
Well, they did it last year and it seemed to work okay. Like, I don't think they hate the results that they got. I think they're probably a little bit even more excited about what could happen with Xavier Worthy. So yeah, it's something to really keep an eye on. Drafting behind Minnesota sucks, man. Like that's the last team that you want to draft behind. Like it's literally the last team you want to draft behind.
They're slated to pick 24th, and their next pick is a comp pick at 97. So it's like they could probably flip 24 for
3-4 picks.
2 day 2 picks and probably a day 3 pick.
Yeah, and if it's someone on the back end, then you just swap first, and maybe you get like you said, you move back a few spots, and then it's a shitty place to pick. Like it's a real shitty place to pick right behind Minnesota, because they're going to prey on you, especially if someone likes something that you like. So you got to keep a close eye on that. If you're excited for something, just probably tame yourself in the first round, because Minnesota, that's a hellacious situation there. Not great. Not great. Next path to the prospect, Ohio State running back Trey Henderson.
I don't know how he's there at 58. I really don't. Top end for him, Kansas City at 31.
Yeah. Yeah, the Edwards-Helaire thing, a lot of people will bring up. I don't think that will cause them to shy away. He possesses the perfect complementary skill that you want from a running back, and he also has the potential to be an every down back. So I don't know that there's too many other running backs like that we're talking about here, and we're not getting into like Smith and Blue territory when it comes to potential as a receiver. But if we're talking about top end, top 3 round running back, and we're talking about adding another element in the pass game, there's no one better, and he has potential to be an every down back as well. So Trey Henderson, do you even consider it at 25? I don't know. Could I see him going on the back end of the first round? I could. But if he's there at 58, I think it would be one of the bigger surprises for me personally. I just don't see how that happens.
I'm trying to these are the teams picking after the Texans that I thought about for Henderson. Kansas City at 31, Cleveland at 33, Las Vegas at 37, obviously the Chip Kelly connection. New England at 38, he'd be great with Ramondre Stevenson. San Fran at 43. I mean, they traded their backup guy in Mason, and you know who knows how long Christian McCaffrey's body is going to hold up. 44 to Dallas, 49 to Cincinnati, 51 to Denver, and then 55 to the Chargers, 57 to the Panthers. Like, a lot of guys that a lot of teams have to make a decision that's not him to get to 58.
Yeah, so you're kind of in no man's land because if on one hand you say, well, he's not worth 25, then it's like, well, you're going to be screwed. The other thing is, and this is maybe a nobody's talking about, maybe a who gives a shit. But there's 2 guys that you just mentioned that have strong Ohio State ties. That I probably think they probably look at him somewhat favorably. One of them actually called plays for him last year in Chip Kelly. They're being talked about as potentially a Genty type of squad or something like that. If they pass up on that, then if they take Genty, then you can maybe cross them off the list. Maybe I would think. I don't know.
Yeah,
They're kind of a wacky situation. And then Mike Vrabel's an Ohio State guy too. So maybe he wants to add a playmaker, especially if they go O-line. Because if New England decides, hey, screw your Warren long shot that y'all brought up, we're going O-line, then maybe they try to add some skill position on the back end. So yeah, I we say he doesn't get to 58. I don't think he gets to 48. Like it just doesn't. It seems like you're almost in no man's land, depending on maybe a trade back with a Kansas City or something like that. Which people are like, well, you trade with, but I mean, Kansas City traded with Buffalo last year, so it's not the craziest thing in the world. So it's something to keep an eye on. But I think he's the most difficult one to talk about because he probably will be there at 25. Like, yeah. And then he definitely won't be there at 59. So it's just kind of I
mean, I keep kind of just peering around and looking like 46. If he's there at 46, you can call Atlanta and you could probably get a deal done.
Next one. And he's been getting some attention lately on the Twitter sphere. First, the super chat. Herman says, shout out to you guys. Love this show. We love you, my friend. Much appreciation. Thank you for
Herman.
swarming the Sioux.
You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
Let's go to Oregon. Josh Conerly Jr., the offensive tackle.
He's in like a weird no man's land. Like if he ends up on the Texans, it's because they overdrafted him. Not many people believe he's a top 25 guy. So if he ends up on the Texans, it's because they drafted him at 25. Because he's also good enough to not be there at 58. So he's an interesting player in a trade back scenario. We talked about that with Trey Henderson a moment ago. But picking him at 25 would be a little uninspiring because it'd be sort of a we're smarter than everybody type of like, oh, well, we know these linemen are all available, but we're smarter than you, so we're going to take this guy, which is the same thing they did with Juice Scruggs, and that didn't work out. And so I don't love Conerly if he ends up on the Texans at 25. He's a lot easier to digest if he ends up on the Texans after the 25th pick.
The path to this, and I'll go inside the conversations instead of the draft thing. Like they would have to not have a ton of confidence in Blake Fisher, right? I don't want to say this would be like admitting defeat, but if you feel awesome about Blake Fisher, I just don't think you make this pick. Maybe you think that can be your starting tackle duo, but this would almost feel like either an admittance that you don't feel great about Blake Fisher as one of the starting tackles, or the Blake Fisher move of 2024 on steroids, where you're basically reaching significantly for a tackle, and it might not even be a this year type of move, but it's a long-term 2-year type of move where you see him as like a long-term fit.
Yeah, and he did not look good at guard at the Senior Bowl. And, well, he didn't look good at tackle at the Senior Bowl. There's the highlight. I mean, Mike Green, the Marshall defensive end, he was viral for 3 days because he just absolutely dominated Conerly, but he didn't look good at guard. The Senior Bowl was probably bad for him. It's not often bad for guys, but he was considered one of the top tackles. He went to the Senior Bowl. There was the Senior Bowl was kind of crowing that, hey, he wanted to come and compete. He went out there and he kind of got his butt kicked a couple times. And so the Senior Bowl wasn't that good for him compared to some of these other offensive linemen. And so I don't really think there's a lot of guard there to him because he's not as powerful as some of these other tackles that would be moving inside. So it should be a pretty uninspiring selection. And maybe he's the left tackle of the future, but you're in a situation in 2025. You can't worry too much about the future. Like, you need guys that can help you in 2025.
We're drafting red shirts in the pros, man.
I don't know that Conerly's that guy.
Yeah, that would be very unexciting. Now, this one would be exciting. This would create some buzz, big time. Luther Burden out of Missouri. The path to this is, I could see a couple. I don't think it's quite Trey Henderson, where I don't see any scenario where Henderson's there at 58. I could see a guy like Burden falling to 58, but I would lean closer to 25 as far as possibly getting him than 58. But I don't think crazier things have happened than Luther Burden falling to 58.
It's fun to kind of think about him as like offensive weapon, because the Texans don't have like an offensive weapon guy. They don't have like Christian Kirk. I know can play inside and outside, but you're not just like, oh, I'm dying to get the ball in Christian Kirk's hands. Like, Christian Kirk's a wide receiver. He goes and runs the routes. He gets open. You throw him the ball. Like, Burden kind of feels like the type of guy where it's like, I'm going to find ways to get the ball in his hands. I'm going to throw him a screen. I'm going to throw him a toss. I'm going to, sort of gimmick some plays where I know he's going to be open, get him the ball in space and let him work. He's an interesting player. Probably one of the more explosive wide receivers in this draft. He was one of the best players in the country in 2023. And then the Missouri sucked. They force-fed him the ball in 2024. The stats still didn't look good compared to 2023. But, like, there's a lot to like about him. He played a lot in the slot, but don't get buried on that. He can play outside. And
they don't care if you've played in the slot, by the way. That's not going to stop them.
No. And so if he's available at 25, like, you could do a lot worse than Luther Burden. That takes care of one of your needs from this draft as wide receiver. Now you'd like to get maybe an investment in Burden allows you to draft sort of a one-trick pony player later in the draft. So a player that only has a certain wide receiver skill set. Like, Burden's ability to do a lot allows you to take a risk later in the draft. Like, oh, well, this player, whoever the player may be, he's really only kind of a run deep, take the top off the defense type of guy. He can't run in cut routes. We don't really want him to catch the ball, short. We want to just run deep. Like you can kind of take a risk with that other wide receiver that you want to add because Burton does a lot of different things. So he's an intriguing player to add to the Texans. And again, at 25, you could do a whole lot worse than Luther Burden at 25.
Path to the prospect, Colston Loveland.
I actually today, as we really think about it, I don't see a path to Colston Loveland.
Unless they just love him so much, they're willing to trade up far. And by far, I think ahead of Indianapolis.
13 to Miami.
Yeah, I mean, you're trading up 12 spots. Like you're talking, yeah, you're probably you'd be lucky to have one day 2 pick after that. Like, so you're trading at least 1, 2, 3 to get up there with Miami 12 spots. And then maybe you have 1 3rd-round pick on day 2, which I just don't see them doing. But maybe we're overreacting, but I think the combination of the much discussed receiver class that has question marks, the Brock Bowers impact that we saw last year, the fact that he's pretty damn good. And I also think a lot of teams have kind of accepted the fact that they're not getting Tyler Warren. So it's not like there are too many teams like drafting from like past Indianapolis or even like acting like that's a possibility. So I think you could very easily fall in love with this guy. And let's not also forget that the effing guy who took him who coached him at Michigan happens to be drafting ahead of you as well. Yeah. And he's something to keep an eye on. Hell, people were talking about the Chargers taking Bowers last year. They didn't do it. I would imagine that they saw what he did when they didn't do it. So it just doesn't feel like this is a realistic scenario. And quite frankly, if he's there at 25, good Lord, like you gotta have strong consideration of that. I just don't see it happening.
Oh, if he's there at 25, turn the card in. I mean, it's turn the – if he's there – again, I don't believe he gets to 25. But if he's there at 25, pick him. Pick him. And you'll figure out how to use him. It's pretty easy to put him on the field.
Pretty easy. All right, so that's path to the prospect. Appreciate everyone for coming through. Appreciate Stoots for holding the ish down early on. We got our draft plans. We're getting those going. We'll try to have those to you by Friday. Let you know where the party is. We'll try to figure that out by Friday. There will be one. It will be on Saturday. It will be on day 3, and we'll be posted up out there. We'll probably have live reaction, maybe to each pick, just briefly. But this is more of an opportunity to hang out, chill, enjoy the draft, talk about it. Us to get a little bit of break from the super stream, which is, God, we're talking probably 15 hours combined of streaming on the first 2 days of the draft. So big opportunity to get out on the streets and have some fun. So we got you covered there here on SNL. Subscribe, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to actually like and ride along. Stoots is going to go on at 6 tonight. I'm going to be on at 10:30. So the individual stuff continuing. It felt like this weekend was a little bit long. I'm not going to lie. Like it feels like we haven't done a show in like 2 weeks. And it's like, well, it was actually 3 days ago. I don't know. Does it feel that way for you? Why is it that it always feels the same for everyone, even if they're not like doing the same stuff?
I don't know. It did feel like it because I was sitting there Sunday afternoon and I was like, it's got to be like 6 or 7. And it was like 2:00. And I was like,
dude, my wife said the same thing. Like it was 10:00 and she's like, wait, it's only 10. And I was like, yeah, it felt like it was like 4 a.m. or something.
Yeah.
So, but we were at the same place. We, we co-managed a charity softball game, Boots for Troops, and took a loss. I've lost 2 out of 3 now. This was the rubber game. I'm going to put it on assistant coach Cody Stoots, to be honest with you.
Okay.
He tried to send the go-ahead run and then tripped him, and the guy fell in the top of the 8th inning. So
okay, we're putting that on me, huh?
We ended up losing the game. Third base coach.
We're putting the guy that couldn't find the ball in the outfield twice. He also fell down in right field trying to back up the second baseman after our third baseman just threw the ball way over the second baseman's head. I mean, Guy spent more time on the turf than, I don't know, Kenyon Green.
Yeah, so we were rallying. We tied the game up. The bases were about to be loaded. He rounds third. Would have scored easily. Trips and falls.
And lays on the ground and just looks at me.
Lays on the ground like it's funny, and then gets tagged out.
And I go and literally grab him and throw him towards the base.
So we ended up losing. Not great, but fun. Roger Clemens was out there too. He was on the other squad. So good for him. We got y'all covered. Appreciate everyone for rolling through. Always remember when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together.
Eat good, sleep good, be good. We'll talk Texans again soon. Thanks for watching, everybody.